Hi, and welcome to CryptoBiography. I'm your host, Brandon Starr, and this is the third and final part of the Adler House. I hope you've been enjoying it so far, and if you have any comments or questions about this episode or previous episodes, cryptobiography@gmail.com, or hit us up on Facebook or Twitter. And here we go. Meanwhile, Anna did what she could to find out more about his family, which wasn't much, but she did learn that Adler was German for eagle. Makes sense, she thought. They seemed to have made the eagle their mascot. And it seemed the Adlers were from Germany at some point, having German names. She confirmed that all three of their names were Germanic in origin. She learned how the eagle is common in heraldry, how it was more common on the mainland of Europe than in Britain, how it could be double-headed, how it symbolized strength, and when its wings were outstretched, as on the Adler's door, protection. She also noticed that the eagle is used not only in the United States, for example on the Great Seal of the United States, but in the Roman Empire, in ancient Egypt, in pre-Soviet Russia, and prominently on the symbol of the Nazi Party during the Third Reich. That gave her pause. Or was it just because of the coincidence between the Adlers being German and using an eagle symbol as well? But it could be coincidence. Surely if she had a last name that was a noun, she would incorporate it as a family symbol as well, especially if it was something as grand as an eagle. Plus, she also found that the modern German Republic used this eagle as its symbol. She looked for eagles that looked like the Adler's eagle, with the crest behind the head, but none seemed to fit. Pictures of actual eagles usually had no crest, and the ones with crests looked nothing like the ones the Adlers used, and were from tropical regions in any event, not the United States or Germany. She also looked up Adler and found that it was, among other things, a brand of typewriter. It was used in Nazi Germany and would have been among the tools of that cold, brutal bureaucracy that brought so much misery into the world. An Adler typewriter, she found, was also the kind used by Kubrick to be Jack Torrance's typewriter in The Shining. Interesting choice, she thought. Was Jack being used by a brutal bureaucracy as well? Meanwhile, the watching of Varric was becoming more painful to her. He was clearly smaller, and now perhaps not taller than most kindergartners. He remained painfully thin, yet he didn't seem to be in pain much of the time. He would have his occasional spells, and that seemed to be the extent of his physical suffering. He withdrew from Anna even more completely during this time. She could rarely get him to even look up out of his book at her, and she didn't have the heart to force him. One morning, Miss Crenshaw was waiting with Varric in his room when Anna arrived. She had been let in by one of the regular security people. Anna had seen Ms. Crenshaw rarely, perhaps a few times each week. Usually she would put a few questions to Anna, and Anna did her best to answer truthfully. Most of them seemed personal, but not too invasive. Did she exercise regularly? Did she have any unusual eating habits or food allergies? And so on. The last questions had been asked 2 days ago, on Monday. This day she was standing next to Varric, both of them almost at attention and looking at the door, clearly expecting Anna. Whatever the reason for Ms. Crenshaw being there, it was Varric who took the lead. "Anna," Varric said, and Anna noticed that he addressed her by name, something he rarely had done. "I want to thank you for being such a good caretaker for me." Anna was about to politely reply, but Varric held up a hand. "I know, you were doing your job, and you did it well. I thank you regardless of the reasons you had for it. It has become clear that my condition, though it may be correctable someday, will not be cured before I die. It has become my interest, then, to pass something on of myself. If I cannot pass on my knowledge, then perhaps I can at least pass on my intellect. As you are aware, I am of high intelligence. Though my condition cannot be cured in my own body, it is possible to engineer a cell that has all of my properties, but does not have my condition. This clone, this younger twin, this brother, this new self. However you put it, he would be me in most ways, but without the curse that is causing my death. He could have a normal life, and use that intelligence that will be wasted on me as a seed is wasted if it ends up on bare rock." "Perhaps you see where this is going," Varric said. "I am hoping that you would consent to be the surrogate for my healthy twin. It would mean you're allowing me to pass on my greatest ambition. It would also mean that you would have a great leg up on life. You see, the Adler family is wealthy, and we do not stint at rewarding those who do us great service. We would pay you $3 million, $300,000 upon consent, meaning when you formally consent, using a legal form, and the remainder upon birth. You would, of course, have to sign away all rights to parenting my brother to my father and mother, who, after all, are the rightful genetic parents. This would also mean, however, that you would spend a good amount of time, especially near birth, here in our house. The basement, which has long been used for medical research into my condition, has been altered to provide the best prenatal care. So you would also have to consent to using our facilities and healthcare providers. I understand this is a great service to ask of you. I do not expect you to have to answer right away, but will you at least consider it? Anna couldn't say anything. Finally, she managed to croak, "Yes, I will think about it." "Thank you," said Varric. "Anna, since this would be such a distraction to you, why don't you go home and consider it? I will cover your duties today, and one day may not be enough. But please call tomorrow morning and at least let us know how things are going. And of course, if any questions occur to you, please do let us know." Anna nodded. Anna did have questions, but decided to do some investigating on her own first. When she got home, she looked up surrogacy. Most of what they had said was corroborated. One detail, however, didn't match. She saw that surrogates, beyond medical costs, were usually paid about $40,000 or $50,000. $3 million was a ridiculous overpayment. Or maybe not, she thought. The Adlers, by all appearances, had the money, enough that $3 million would not even be an inconvenience, possibly. And they valued their privacy. Finding a surrogate might be difficult. Then there were the facts surrounding Varric. Apparently this would be an unusual surrogacy, possibly a medical first. That a clone, she supposed was the best word was? A clone, but without Varric's medical condition, and this meant probably everything else about the pregnancy would be expensive anyway. She might only be a line item. And she wondered about freezing. Eggs and sperm could be frozen, but if they had to alter and implant a cell from Varric while he was alive, because freezing was impossible in this process, then the clock was certainly ticking. She knew they wanted her to use their medical providers and that they valued their secrecy, but she could not go into this without consulting a doctor of her own. Her primary care provider was also her OB-GYN, Dr. Linda Matthews. She called Dr. Matthews' office. It was still early in the day, since she had been let off work so soon, and got an appointment for the afternoon. Dr. Matthews was a no-nonsense person, the sort who had long hair, but always kept it up in a tight bun. After describing the situation to her, she immediately said, "I don't like it. The money is too much. I want to know what the catch is." "If there is one, I don't see it," Anna said. "Oh, I don't think they'd have told you. Not yet," Dr. Matthews said. "Why the insistence on using all their own facilities and providers?" "I believe it's because of the unusual nature of the procedure," Anna replied. "I wonder about that," Dr. Matthews says, but did not elaborate. "But do you think I should do it?" Anna said. My opinion is no. But then, I'm not the one being offered a life-changing amount of money. Still, if you do decide to go through with it, first of all, think on the issues that all surrogates need to think about. The physical risks, whether you would feel a lasting bond to the living being you feel growing inside you, and whether you could give that person up. And then think about the unusual aspects of the situation, the secrecy, the overcompensation, the experimental nature of the procedure. Ultimately, I want you to go into this, if you decide to go into this, with your eyes open. Anna nodded her understanding. She thought about it for 2 more days, which Ms. Crenshaw said she should take off while she made her decision. In that time, she decided to talk it over with her parents as well. They were naturally concerned. "Pregnancy is no joke, hon," her mom said. "It changes your body in all kinds of ways. And just for money?" "Not just for money," Anna replied. "I'm helping out a family. and a boy who wants to have a legacy. He's really intelligent, and I'm sure that when his younger twin grows up, he could do great things." "Just how smart is he?" her father asked. "Multiple languages, remarkable vocabulary, and really strong comprehension," she replied. "Really, when he's talking to me, in many ways, it's like speaking to a fellow adult, one who's actually smarter and better read than I am. It's almost intimidating." Her father considered this. "Well, the money would mean you could save most of it, invest it, and potentially never have to worry about money again," he said. "You could then do whatever you want with your life. It's certainly something to think about." Her mother looked unhappy, but nodded, unable to come up with anything against that point. "It does make me nervous, but if you want to do it, we'll support you. Thanks, Mom." "Yes," her father said. "One thing, though. With such a big step and such an unusual set of restrictions they want to put on it, I really must insist that you have a lawyer look over the contract before you sign." Anna hesitated, but this seemed a wise course of action. "Okay, Dad," she said. "Do you have anyone in mind?" "We have a lawyer," he said. "Let's get a hold of him. Either he'll be able to handle it, or he can refer us to someone who can." They got a hold of the lawyer, who had an appointment available the next day. At the law office, Mike Royval greeted them. "Well, let's get it down to business, Erskines," he said, grinning. "Thanks for sending the document ahead of time. It will make this a lot easier. I was able to look at it yesterday evening." "Always on the clock, Mike?" Anna's dad said, smiling. "You know it," Mike replied, grinning back. After seating them, he put his lawyer hat on. "I, too, am not sure why they're putting this kind of money out for your services, Anna," he said. "I've been looking this over with a jaundiced eye, and I'm not seeing anything that looks suspicious to me, which of course makes me more suspicious. But there's just not any problems I can see from a legal standpoint. They do say that just accepting is $300,000. If you are at least implanted, even if the pregnancy is unsuccessful, it's $500,000. And then a total of $3 million at birth, live or dead. The part about using their facilities and personnel makes sense, as this will be in part experimental. I note that if there's a medical emergency on your part, they waive that and you will be sent to a regular hospital. Of course, what constitutes an emergency might be a sticky point. But if we take them at their word, then if you get in medical trouble, they won't keep you in the home. I've also noticed that part of the high amount they're paying you is explained by the fact that you will be spending a larger than normal amounts of time at the home, being carefully watched and having various tests done. I can see where that would be different from a standard surrogacy, where the pregnant woman simply lives a more or less normal pregnant life. So it makes sense that they would pay you more than the normal fee due to your time being taken up. "Do you see anything sinister in store for my daughter, Mike? That's what we're really wondering," Anna's father asked. No, it's a bit unusual, but I don't see anything sinister here," Mike said. "I'd say that if it were my daughter, I would feel okay if she decided to do it." "Can't say fairer than that," Anna's father said. Anna nodded. "Do whatever you have to in order to be comfortable, though, Anna," Mike said. "Remember that they're paying you, and the child will be theirs, but they don't own you. If they do ask for anything over the line, don't hesitate to get your parents or someone involved." "Thank you, sir," Anna said. "Sir," Mike said, grinning. Though a lawyer, he apparently didn't feel like the need to be put on a pedestal. "Funny. You take care, then." "Thanks for your time," Anna's father said, standing and shaking Mike's hand. "No thanks necessary," Mike said, grinning again. "Just payment." In the end, the decision was easy for Anna. "It's just too much money not to do," she said to her parents, "and it may help bring a remarkable person into the world." The process started with preparation. Anna, who already ate a healthy diet, needed to change little, but she did start taking prenatal vitamins. She was given a thorough physical by the Adler doctors. They brought her down to the facilities under the house. She wasn't sure what she was expecting. Visions of the original Frankenstein movie went through her head, but it just looked like any other doctor's office, except perhaps for the lack of windows. The rooms were fairly large and completely finished and furnished, and she couldn't really even tell she was below ground. They had remarkably advanced equipment and didn't have to go to any outside facilities to get all the tests they wanted done. I think some of them are rented, one nurse said, much cheaper than buying them, especially since they'll only need them for a set amount of time. When it was all done, Anna knew more about her physical health than she ever had before. She found that in most respects she was healthy even for her age, but had a bit of a vitamin D deficiency, unusual because she got a lot of outdoor exercise. Nothing that can't be fixed with a bit more outside time, plus some supplements, one of the doctors said. She couldn't remember all the doctors' and nurses' names. There were a number of them, and they seemed to rotate in and out all the time. Specialists, Anna said to herself. They're bringing in who they need at the time they need them. Still, she wondered if there would be any one professional who knew all the little details. She saw Varric less and less. When she saw him, she saw that his size was becoming alarmingly small. He was smaller than a kindergartner and seemed weak, though his eyes remained sharp and intelligent. She could see him looking in on her occasionally, clearly interested in the process that would bring about his brother. Then the visit stopped. She asked about how the process of the implantable egg, or whatever it would be, was going, and was assured that it was coming along and would be ready when she was. Finally, all was ready. The specialist told her that the embryo was prepared and her uterus was at the proper part of her cycle. She had been warned that this was not going to be a simple procedure and that they were going to put her under. Standard surrogacy is pretty simple, they explained, but they usually have multiple embryos that they are implanting, and it doesn't matter if a particular one implants or not. Here, it does. The embryo itself is unique due to the process we use to make it, and may have trouble implanting, and this is the only one being implanted. The anesthesia was administered, and Anna was asked to count backward from 10. If she ever got to 9, she didn't remember it. The anesthesia gave her weird dreams clearly influenced by the procedure being worked on her. She had vivid memories of various strange occurrences, clamps being put over her arms and her neck, strange slithering sensations as of snakes crawling over her feet and legs, pressure on her belly as though someone were pushing down on it, words and phrases that should be English yet were unintelligible to her. When she woke up, she had no idea how long she was out. "How did it go? Is everything okay?" she asked. A nurse was already by her side. "It went as well as can be expected," she told Anna. "We'll be finding out if the pregnancy took soon, within a few days." "Yes, it did go well," a doctor said, appearing by Anna's side. "I was watching the implantation on a laparoscopic camera. It's a little tricky to be certain, but it certainly looked as though the little guy wanted to grab onto the wall." Anna smiled. "That's great," she said. "Am I supposed to be this tired?" The doctor grinned. "Leftovers from the anesthesia. You can call your parents if you like. Let them know it went well. You'll be able to go home later tonight. Sleep in your own bed. We'll have you back for just a few tests tomorrow. Sound good?" "Yeah," Anna said, and accepted some ice chips from the nurse. The anesthesia, or perhaps the procedure, had left her parchingly thirsty. The procedure had been a success. Anna found it to be a somewhat odd feeling having a baby growing inside her that was not her own, nor would she raise it. She found herself having, but not fully succeeding, to keep the situation emotionally at arm's length. She knew now that if it were her own child, she would immediately bond with it. And yet, because it wasn't her child, she also felt a strange extra feeling of responsibility. She felt obligated to do everything she could to make the baby healthy. She probably would have for her own child as well, but the emotional mechanism felt quite different. She turned down most snacks with a polite shake of her head and kept up her exercise. She had strange dreams. It was natural, she told herself, to dream about something that obsessed you throughout your waking hours. She dreamt of Varric, his pale face and large sunken eyes, and how his twin would live on, hopefully healthy. She was doing everything she could on her end, and if the specialists were to believe, the embryo, which they tested regularly, was free of the genetic disorder that had doomed Varric. And doomed he had been. Anna got the news from Ms. Crenshaw after one morning's battery of tests. Anna was sad, but as she had prepared herself for it, it didn't surprise her. She hadn't even seen Varric since before the implantation, and surely he had been dreadfully ill before he died, too ill to check in on her like he had been. So she dreamed of Varric and the baby and of her swelling belly and the eagle, the Adler eagle. Somehow the one on top of the flagpole kept returning to her in her dreams, pointing east with its beak, crest swept back. Finally the day came. Anna could feel the contractions coming closer together, and of course she was already in the Adler home when they started. The birth went well. She was able to deliver without a cesarean section, but did need an epidural. It took several hours, which the nurses assured her was fine, even quick, for a first birth. When the infant was delivered, they rushed him out of the room very quickly. But there was a moment, just a moment, when the infant was visible to Anna, and the infant was looking back at her. It had, of course, Varric's features, and though he was not strong enough to lift his head, the look in his eyes was strangely intelligent. Anna could have sworn that it recognized her, or at least would remember her, even though the thought of it seemed strange. That child is going to be a genius like Varric, Anna thought. Just before the door closed, she heard a few words in German, but not speaking it, she didn't know what they meant. Miss Crenshaw came in and sat near her, asking her if she required anything, and assuring Anna that it had all gone to plan. "The remaining monies will be transferred to your accounts today," Miss Crenshaw said. Anna just nodded, not knowing what to say. "Do you have any questions, Anna?" Miss Crenshaw asked. Anna considered it. She knew that asking to see the infant was out of the question. "No questions. I know I will likely never see him again, but I hope he lives a long, full life, free of the troubles that afflicted Varric, and I'm happy to have played a part in that." Miss Crenshaw didn't say anything, didn't promise to pass along Anna's good wishes, but just gave her a nod and a rather tight smile. Anna was able to stay in her own bed that night. She rested, and at one point pulled up the application that showed her bank account information. Sure enough, the transfer was listed there, though pending. That sum would be held by her bank as long as they could before they released it to her account to actually spend. "I'm going to have to figure out how to invest this," she thought. She also looked up the one word she memorized from the partial sentence she had heard after the birth. After some difficulty determining the proper spelling, which she of course did not have, she found it. Neugeboren. It meant rebirth. Apparently, Anna thought, the infant looked so much like Varric that it must have seemed like he was back. Then it hit her. The eagle. Was it an eagle? She looked around at a lot of pictures of eagles in various forms. It seemed that the eagle, when it had a crest, was a throwback, a reference to the phoenix. Rebirth. Anna felt herself go numb. The Adlers meant the eagle. But did it really mean the phoenix? She had not seen Varric the weeks before his supposed death. Was it the birth of a brother she had aided? Or was it a rebirth? And that's the end of the story. Hope you enjoyed it. If you have any comments or questions about this episode or previous episodes, cryptobiography@gmail.com, or hit us up on Facebook or Twitter. And thanks for listening. Words and music, copyright 2019, CryptoBiography LLC, all rights reserved. Characters and events are fictional, fictionalized, or satirical.